Thomas goes fishing. Thomas the Tank Engine has his own branch line. It was his reward for helping James the Red Engine. The trucks had pushed James off the rails and Thomas had helped rescue him. Thomas was very proud of his branch line. Every day he puffed up and down with his two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle. He always looked forward to something special, the river. He rumbled over the bridge. He would see people fishing down below. He often wanted to stay and watch, but his driver always said no. What would the Fat Controller say if we were late? Thomas still thought it would be lovely to stop by the river and do something fishing. Every time Thomas met another engineer would say, "I want to fish," but all the engines just gave the same answer. The engines don't go fishing. And that's just what James said as he passed Thomas that day. One day Thomas stopped at usual to take on water. The station by the river. Then he saw a big painted notice. It read, "Out of order." Thomas was very thirsty. The driver had an idea. They would get water from the river. They found a bucket with the rope and they went to the bridge. The driver let the bucket down into the water. The bucket was old and had 5 holes, so they had to fill it and pull it up and empty it into Thomas's tank as quickly as they could, again and again. At last they were finished. That's good, puffed Thomas as he stared off again. Then and Clara running happily behind. They puffed along the valley until suddenly Thomas began to feel a pain in his boiler. The steam began to hiss from his safety valve and along the way. "There's too much steam," said his driver. The fireman tried to let more water into the boiler, but none came. "Oh dear," moaned Thomas, I'm going to burst. They damped down his fire and struggled on. I've got such a pain, Thomas hissed. They stopped outside at the last station. Annie and Clarabelle were uncoupled. The driver ran Thomas onto a siding. Right out of the way, he was still hissing, fit to burst. The guard telephoned for an engine inspector, and the driver found 2 notices that they were written in large letters and read, "Danger, keep away." Soon the inspector and the Fat Controller arrived. "Cheer up, Thomas," they said. "We'll soon put you right." The driver told him what had happened. The engine inspector thought that trouble must be feeding the pipe. The inspector climbed up to have a look. He peered into it and then he came down. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "Please look in the tank and tell me what you see." The Fat Controller clambered up and nearly fell into surprise. "Inspector," he whispered, "can you see fish?" "Gracious goodness me, how did the fish get in there, driver?" asked the inspector. "We must have fished them out of the river with our bucket," said Thomas's driver. "Well, Thomas, your driver had been fishing, But fish don't suit you, we must get them out, he said to the Fat Controller. They took turns at fishing in Thomas's tank. The Fat Controller looked and told them how to do it. When they had caught all the fish, they had a lovely picnic of supper of fish and chips. That was good, said the Fat Controller as he finished off his share. But fish don't suit you, Thomas, so you mustn't do it again. No, sir, I won't, said Thomas sadly. Engines don't go fishing, it's too uncomfortable. James and the Troublesome Trucks. James had not seen the Fat Controller for some time, not since the day when he had nearly lost his red coat and been painted blue instead. That was the time when James had been very naughty. First, he had let off steam and sprayed water on the Fat Controller's new top hat. Then he ran too fast and made a hole in one of the coaches, and the driver had to mend the hole with a newspaper and a passenger's bootlace. The Fat Controller had been very angry. Now James was alone in the shed. He wasn't even allowed to push coaches and trucks in the yard. At last the Fat Controller arrived and came to see him. I can see that you are sorry, James, he said. I hope that you will be a better engine. Now have given me a lot of trouble, said the Fat Controller. People are laughing at my railway and it is laughing at all. James said he would be very sorry and promised to be a better engine. The Fat Controller said, I want you to pull some trucks for me. James was delighted and puffed away. Here are your trucks, James, said Thomas the tank engine. Have you got some bootlaces ready, Thomas? And ran off laughing. Oh, said the trucks. We want a proper engine, not a red monster. But James took no notice and started as soon as the guard was ready. Come along, he puffed, but the trucks were being naughty. We won't, they screamed. James took no notice and he pulled the screeching truck sternly along the station to the line. The trucks tried very hard to make James give up, but he still kept on going. And sometimes their axles would run hot. Each time the trouble had put right, and each time James would start again, but he was not going to let them beat him. Give up, you can't pull us, shouted the trucks. But James puffed on slowly as he pulled them along the line. At last they saw Gordon's Hill. This was the famous place where Gordon, that big proud engine, had once got stuck. The engine had once got stuck. Little Edward, one of the tender engines, had to push Gordon up the hill. As James came nearer to the hill, his driver warned him to be careful, to look out for trouble from the trucks. We'll go fast and get them up the hill before we knew. The driver won't. Oh, the driver whispered to James, don't let them win you. Soon James was going faster and faster, and soon they were halfway up the hill. I'm doing it, he panted. Will the top ever come? Then with a sudden jerk it became all much easier. James thought it was over and they pulled the trucks to the top of the hill without any trouble, but his driver shut off steam. There's done it again, he said. Look, we've left our tail behind. Look, there's the last trucks running backwards. Down the hill the coupling had broken, but the guard stopped the trucks and climbed in to warn the other engines. That's why it's so easy, said James as he backed away to the other engines down the hill. What silly things trucks are. You might have to be in truck's accident. Edward had come along. He offered to help, but James had decided that he was going to pull his trucks by himself. Good, said Edward. Don't let them beat you. James struggled slowly up the hill. He pulled and puffed as hard as he could. After a long time, he finally pulled the trucks to the top. I've done it, he cried. His driver cheered. When they reached the station safely and James was resting in the yard when Edward pulled up. Peep, peep, he whistled. Then James saw the Fat Controller. He thought that he would be in trouble, but the Fat Controller was smiling. He had been in Edward's train and he had seen everything. You've made the most troublesome trucks on the line behave, he said. After that, you deserve to keep your red coat. The end.